Hey everyone, Christopher Ludwig here, Editor-in-Chief at Automotive Logistics. And today we have a special treat. We're going to turn the clock back a couple of weeks to Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Global Live, conference in Detroit covering automotive supply chain and logistics, where we had a number of really key ideas labs, workshops available only to those who were at the event. And what we want to do is pick out some of the really key topics and workshops there and with the leaders from them, and share some of the key outputs, questions, solutions that came out of them. And one of the really interesting ones at the session was data-centric supply chains. And I'm really pleased to welcome Akhil Dabas, who's the Vice President of Supply Chain for Tech Mahindra, who led this session, and of course has some really interesting insights on the IT and digitalization side of the supply chain. So firstly, welcome, Akhil. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So we just want to set the scene quickly. Can you tell us a little bit about the central theme of the Ideas Lab?
Yeah, I think you thanks for asking the question. We I think spoke with you guys before the conference and ran through several ideas and felt like this is one that really is at the heart of what we are hearing with our customers, every leader that we speak to in the supply chains. And it just has several meanings for several people. And we just wanted to explore what really people meant when they use the word data-driven supply chains. So I think it was a very apt sort of topic to pick up for the discussion.
Great. And just tell us a little bit about the demographics of the workshop. What sort of companies were there?
Yeah, I think it was a mix. It was a healthy mix of, the auto OEMs. I think we saw some tier one suppliers to the OEMs there. We also saw several logistics players in the mix. So I think a healthy mix of, the supply chain ecosystem, I would say.
Great. And so what I understand happened in the workshop, there were a number of key areas that you as the leader addressed. And so I just want to spend a couple minutes going through each of those to understand a bit more about what we learned from some of them from the audience. So, firstly, I think you covered off the value of data and analytics, and what the value of that is in the broader supply chain. So tell us a little bit about what was discussed there.
Yeah, I think we ended up discussing several items, really. The intention was to obviously go through, what really is going on in people's mind, in supply chain in general. But I think, having this data-focused conversation, the question that I really was asking folks was, when you use this term, what do you really mean? Are you talking data that helps create more visibility for you guys? Are you talking analytics? Because that's what you end up talking. The moment you use the word data, you end up talking analytics. Or is there more to it? The new age technology that we discuss quite a bit now. AI, ML, blockchain, and how you can use that on this data to drive some really interesting decisions within the organization. So a fairly broad set of questions were asked, were raised, some very interesting responses really from all walks of the ecosystem.
One of the topics, this threaded throughout the event, and I think it was also discussed in the workshop too. We talk about sourcing, whether that's decisions on sourcing, localization, how much in terms of bringing about more supply chain resiliency, and how much this helps with that. How was that addressed in the session?
Yeah, so I think you guys, when you ran the very first day of the conference, I remember you guys were talking to a very senior leader. And on the side, you guys were running this survey of sorts, of what is on people's mind. So I know the number one item was supply chain visibility, control towers, and things like that. But if you recall, the second item on the list was supply chain resiliency, right? With having the right supply base in the right regions, etc. And I sort of double clicked on that in our session, and I think people are starting to figure out better ways to run their supply chain organization when it comes to supply bases. That a lot of this has been sort of very heavy in one particular geography in the world, And I think people are starting to realize that is not going to work for them in the long run. There are just so many issues, and we've seen almost all of those issues in the last 3-4 years. And so people are starting to move these supply bases quite a bit. And I think data is playing a very central role in understanding where we have them today, a lot of spend analytics and, stuff like that. And finally, really taking action. I think the whole analysis, etc., has been done for a long, long time. But in my opinion, people have not really taken a whole lot of action. But we saw this action almost forced because of what happened in COVID and many other things. In the US trade market, that people are starting to move a lot of their stuff from one geography to several others. So they really want to diversify. So diversification is one element that I see a lot going on within supply chains when it comes to supply, sources. But the second is they're moving them closer. So I see a lot of, for the US market, I see a lot, moving to Mexico now. But they're also trying to figure out if there are big enough markets around the world. Can we move those supplies and sources closer to those markets? And that's what the whole regionalization aspect of this story is. And I heard actually a lot of these folks starting to think in that direction. So all in all, I think it's a positive move. It will really help all of this clogging that you see in supply chains ease up if we start to see, you know, things getting bought in places where they are to be sold, right? So in the markets, and I think we'll see a lot of this in the next couple of years.
It's a great point, Akhil. And in the session you referred to with Kelly Bysouth, who was the chief supply chain officer, and I think one of the things Kelly and others talked about indeed was, really understanding that data in a way, bring it much more to the fore, board level, CEOs seeing and understanding, what those cost inputs are, and perhaps, as you say, it's not that it wasn't done before, but they're certainly getting noticed more now, and having the right data in the right place is essential to that. Let's another topic, and I know that you were addressing another, let's call it buzzword, right, around end-to-end visibility, which is also key. Again, if we go back to what happened across many discussions at the conference. So, I think your question was around the industry's maturity in this area. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that in the context of the Ideas Lab?
Yeah, I think I'm glad you did that survey in the beginning. It really is sort of set the stage of what should be discussed, should be talked in those 2 days. And I think the number one item was really this whole visibility conversation. And I have to tell you this, right? That this has been going on for some time now. I mean, I've been hearing about visibility in general for the last so many years, right? And people talk about all sorts of technology that is out there to help build this. When I talk to some of these clients, some of my colleagues in this space, I think it sort of gets stuck in this area where hey, listen, if we got bad data, there's no point creating this entire visibility platform. And I think in the last many years now, people have focused a lot on cleaning up their data. And I think now that the data is at a place where it can sort of start making sense, uh, the whole control tower space is opening up. There are a lot of software companies that have created these products. It actually started off with most of the logistics companies actually creating these logistics control tower, as they said. But that has now expanded into a much broader end-to-end control tower for organizations where they can really see everything from forecasting, planning, make, source, all the way to deliver, returns, etc. in one place. Uh, and I think this will continue to heat up. The challenge really is going to be, how you get these people on board, right? There are just so many disparate sources of these data, so many systems, so many ERPs. There are internal systems, there are external systems, right? So you can obviously control everything you have within the organization, but then you have on the left, the sources that you have to deal with. it is actually getting even more interesting because you don't really focus on just your supplies. You're really talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supplies, so that you can understand the real impact that these guys in very deep tiered sources can have on your supply chain and your customers. And same goes on on the right side for the guys who run logistics. Many are sort of third party logistics companies, right? So it will be an interesting sort of problem to solve. The good news is that the platforms now exist with many of these software providers. Also, I know the hyperscalers on the cloud are also sort of putting some of this together. I actually was in a presentation with the Google Cloud Platform guys who just launched their supply chain control tower concept. So I think this is a place where you'll see the most action, in my opinion. And there's a lot of value to be had once you know where things are in your house, right? In your home, in your company, you can do much better with it if you know where they are. And I think this whole control tower solution or set of solutions could be sort of the game changer for many of these companies.
Yeah, they're very exciting, and indeed, you mentioned the Google Cloud platform there too. Maybe the last question here is really, what's the real capabilities of these control towers? What can they really achieve? As you've alluded to, it's not that a control tower as such is new, but now we see hyperscalers. Now we see this going in a whole new direction. So what can we really anticipate this achieving for the supply chain?
Yeah, I think people will just have to get a little more educated about these things. I in the session that I was, with several leaders there, and I think it was by design. It's possible it was by design that you guys had most of the sort of supply chain functional leaders in the sessions. I did not see a lot of technology folks in there. And therefore, when I talked about some of the capabilities that exist, in terms of control tower, in terms of what, AI and ML can do for you guys, blockchain, etc., I think people were excited to hear that it exists, but I think they were not very educated about. So, okay, I get it. I hear it in, many places, but how does it really manifest into a real solution for my organization? I think that I see as a gap. So the technology exists, the problem exists, but the folks who have to speak probably are not speaking. And I think that is something that we got to do as partners, in educating um, our colleagues in the space as to how this can really work. You got the solution, but there's a lot of preparation that has to happen, in my opinion, in these organizations to actually take this to the level of what these control towers can actually do for you. So there's a lot of preparedness, in my opinion, a lot of sort of culture change. Remember, these are newer technologies. People are used to doing things their way, have been for the last several decades, and so culture and change management are going to be very important within these organizations as they take this journey, to these newer technologies.
I think it's a great mission statement that we work together to help to educate the industry more on this, and hopefully move some of these functional leaders from using the buzzwords to realizing what the reality is and the
Yeah.
capabilities are already in the market. And we see many reasons why they need them. We're reminded every day about the requirements of visibility and the disruption that they can help mitigate. Akhil, thank you so much for helping us with the session, and for running the Ideas Lab, and for talking to me about it, and sharing with our audience today. It's been a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you very much.